Story 1. I am not a lawyer but work in the court system. One case that came in was a couple divorcing on mutual terms. The husband had one child with her, and the wife had a child from a previous marriage. He agreed to pay child support for both children. I guess he really cared about this other child enough to support her even though it isn't his obligation. The judge signs the order, they go to set up the child support account, and it gets rejected, saying you can't have two accounts for one child. It turns out she had been collecting child support from the biological father the entire time and never told him. She basically tried to obtain support from two fathers for one child, and the other attorney knew about it. Story 2. Not my case, but during my first year of law school, lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of different areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of a rather well-to-do couple that spent months and months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything, all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember the significance, but somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided, they spent many more months and nearly $100,000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps and smashed the ceramic ashtray, leaving the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. I decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. Spent $100,000 to win an ashtray only to smash it in spite. Story 3. Once had a boss who had to leave his house for 6 hours while his ex-wife grabbed all the belongings she was legally entitled to. When he returned home, every knob and handle was gone. Door knobs, cabinet handles, drawer handles, anything that was screwed onto something and used to open it, she had taken. Every day for the next week, he would occasionally yell out, "She took the knobs." Story 4. I am an interpreter who works frequently with police and lawyers. The most out there thing I ever interpreted in court went like this. "Miss So-and-so, we have known each other for a long time, correct?" "Yes. As a matter of fact, we have known each other for 5 years, correct?" "Yes. And at the end of each and every meeting we had during the past 5 years, we always agreed on one thing, correct?" "Yes. Please tell the judge what we agree on. It's not okay to break into my ex's apartment and lick all his cutlery. Yet here we are, Miss So-and-so." Story 5. I did not handle the divorce. I handled parts of the aftermath. In the divorce, she went absent without leave, was living in a truck somewhere, and just could not handle it mentally. He gave her 5 of his 9 companies. They were the ones that owed 7 figures in payroll taxes. He had made her the bookkeeper on paper. She spent decades trying to shake the Internal Revenue Service for the results. Story 6. Today I learned. When you are about to go through a divorce, do not clean out the accounts and hide the money. Grab your pets and put them in a safe place where nobody will ever find them until the divorce is long over. Story 7. I am a lawyer but have had a very limited amount of experience in divorce cases. The first case I ever worked, the husband shaved and waxed every single hair off his body in an attempt to avoid a court-mandated drug test. Story 8. I worked at a family law firm but have since moved on. The worst case I saw involved a decades-long dispute. A husband had been in a motorcycle accident and suffered brain damage, resulting in severely limited capacity going forward. He received a substantial settlement afterward. His wife spent the next several years stealing all his money and property by either forging his signature or putting documents in front of him that he couldn't understand, telling him they were something benign so he would sign them. She then forged a series of letters from the tax authority, convincing him that he was about to go to jail and persuading him to flee the country. He finally returned several years later to discover that everything he owned was in her name, and one of the documents he had been told to sign was divorce papers. The man was left with nothing. I moved on before finding out how the story ended. Story 9. A soon-to-be ex-husband left his wife's prized koi to die on the doorstep of their house. Apparently, the value of these fish, 6 in total, was over $100,000. She was, according to her lawyer, so distraught that she couldn't be in court. Only in Los Angeles. Story 10. Another Reddit user a few years ago shared a story about a couple getting divorced. I couldn't find the original poster, but here's a quote from a website that covered it. "Not me but a neighbor. The couple got divorced and she got the house in the settlement. Only the house and the immediate house lot, not the surrounding land, that went to the husband. The first thing he did was sell all the lumber off the rest of the land. She went from living in a nice forest to living in a clear-cut. He wasn't done yet. Once the trees were gone, he sold off the topsoil, then the gravel under that. By the time he was done, her house was on a hill overlooking a barren landscape reminiscent of the lunar surface. This was years ago, and the place is still hideous. Story 11. Not my divorce, but my divorce lawyer told me about a case she was involved in where both clients were so petty that they had to all meet to argue over literally every single scrap of everything. The final object that neither would settle on was a ceramic rabbit statue, a really generic one from Home Depot or whatever. Zero sentimental value, but since it was the final item, neither side wanted to lose the last thing, and they dragged it out over 3 separate meetings for this one thing. I don't remember which ended up getting it, but once they settled it and signed everything, the winning party stuck it on their lawyer's desk as a gift and walked out. Story 12. My friend was going through a divorce from her insane husband. He had been texting her pictures of the gun he bought and threatening her. The police were called. There was nothing they could do because it was only a picture. He was staying with a secret girlfriend at this point. She allowed him to go get his stuff from the house. She was scared to go back into the house alone, so I went with her. The first red flag was that he had changed the locks. We waited for a locksmith to open the house and change the locks again. When the door opened, we noticed all of the furniture was gone. We carefully went upstairs in search of her cats. The entire second floor was empty. No cats, no furniture, even her clothes were gone. It turned out he had hired a moving company to pack and take everything, even the food in the fridge. We finally found the cats. He had taken them to another vet in town and put them up for boarding under his sister's name, thinking she would not be able to find them. He was finally forced to disclose what happened to her possessions. He had them taken to a storage unit far away from the home. Story 13. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my parents got divorced about a year ago. My mom didn't want my dad to show up in court because he would contest, and then they would have to split the assets. She phoned me and told me to put laxatives in his food so he wouldn't be able to make it there. Story 14. Divorce lawyer here. Spouse had been out of the house for weeks. She waited until he was on a business trip, came into the house, turned on all of the faucets, plugged the drains, turned off the furnace, and left. It was minus 10 degrees. He came back 5 days later. The house was ruined. The water froze and cracked the foundation. Story 15. Had a client whose wife wanted him out of the house. I told him not to leave, just move to a different bedroom for the time being because once he was out, the chances of him ever getting back in were slim. He texted his wife and told her he was staying in the house. She called back and left a voicemail that she wanted him out. And if he wasn't out soon, she would start taking out her unhappiness on the children and would remind the children that mommy was being mean to them because daddy wouldn't leave. Story 16. I do not practice divorce law, but I did an internship with a family law judge in law school that involved me sitting in on many cases. One divorced couple came in because the ex-husband wanted to lower his spousal support payments due to his reduced income, increased financial responsibilities, and the fact that his ex-wife was declining to seek paid employment, all of which sounded reasonable at first. It turned out that while his income had been reduced due to job cuts, his new wife, who technically worked as his assistant, and had done so prior to the divorce, was now making 4 times her previous salary, more than he ever had. He claimed that his ex-wife had unpaid renters living with her and could have money to survive if she charged them rent. It turned out they were the couple's shared 18-year-old twins who were living at home, having just graduated from high school, and were going to continue living at home while starting college in the fall. It also later turned out that he allowed his stepdaughter and her 2 children to live with him and his wife rent-free and paid for her college. His ex-wife produced evidence that he told his own kids to figure out paying for college themselves. He claimed that his ex-wife worked as a nanny for free by choice and should be getting paid for work elsewhere. The kids she watched for free were their 3 joint grandchildren from their eldest child, 2 of whom were severely disabled. He claimed that when he married his new wife, he gained over 15 new dependents, which was technically true, but those dependents were all in Mexico and included his new wife's grown siblings and their families, none of whom he had ever met. This man was shocked when spousal support wasn't decreased. Story 17. My dad is a divorce attorney. His clients couldn't decide who would get the Labrador puppies from a new litter they just bred. The pups are worth $1,000 each. They also hadn't been up to date on their payments. So, Dad brought a litter of 8 floppy puppies home as collateral for us to have until they could negotiate the settlement. So much fun for us kids. Story 18. My client's spouse accused him of giving his deceased wife cancer. I represented a man who was on his second marriage. His first wife passed away from cancer, and he and his children were obviously devastated. My client was a sensitive man with a big heart. His second wife could be very charming, which was why he fell for her, but it was all a facade. Anyway, to make a long story about a lengthy divorce short, my client met a very kind and affectionate woman during his case. They really hit it off and were basically engaged, even though his divorce was far from over. The fiancé started having health problems and was diagnosed with a form of terminal cancer. Somehow, the second wife found out about this and tried to use the cancer diagnosis against my client in court. She developed this crazy theory that my client had killed his first wife by giving her cancer and that he was doing the same thing to his fiancée. The second wife's attorney, who was quite good, refused to be a party to it. The attorney never addressed the argument in court and didn't even ask the second wife any questions about it during testimony. Rather, the attorney informed the judge that the second wife wished to address the court directly about an issue. The judge allowed her to do so in a highly irregular move. The second wife told her crazy conspiracy theory to the judge, adding that she was certain my client had tried to give her cancer at some point as well. I wish I had an artist's rendering of the scene, capturing the second wife's crazy eyes, her attorney's look of shame and embarrassment, the judge's look of confusion and ennui, and my look of awe-inspired disgust. Story 19. I was an assistant for a family law practice, not a lawyer. It was already a disaster of a divorce because the ex-husband was difficult. But it got so much worse when the wife started dating someone new with a severe cat allergy about a year after they split up. Her ex bought a cat during his time with the kids, even though he was not allowed pets at his apartment. He sent the kids back to their mom's house with the cat and all its belongings. Mom was upset because she did not want a cat at all, and her boyfriend was extremely allergic. She called us asking what to do because her kids were crying, saying she couldn't get rid of their new sibling, and she had the cat in the garage. The ex told the kids, "If mommy loves you, she'll let you keep the cat since daddy is not allowed to have cats at his house." Story 20. Paralegal for divorce lawyer. This one is morbid. We represented a man who believed strongly that his wife was assaulting the children. The authorities were involved. Child services were involved. It was never clear what the truth was or if anything at all was going on, but our client was sure. He shot his wife dead at a custody exchange in front of the children. He then sat down and waited for the authorities. We visited him in jail with his criminal defense attorney. As we were leaving, he told me, "Well, I guess the divorce is over now." And he laughed. This was the first time I had ever been speechless. This has gotten many responses. I cannot really reveal details or context here, but I can safely say that defending this action as heroic or understandable is an incorrect takeaway. There are no heroes here. The trauma this man put the children through is incredibly selfish, regardless of his intentions. There are so many other options that could have been explored, many of which were being explored when this happened. He abruptly put an end to all of them, making the truth forever impossible to discern. Where are they now? The children are in the custody of a family member. They are safe and well, although they will no doubt need extensive therapy as they get older. He is in jail. I am unsure of his final sentence. However, I doubt he will ever leave. What did the kids say? Forensic interviews are very confidential, and this case did not have the chance to go to a hearing. However, after multiple interviews with both children and the parents, neither the police, child services, guardian ad litem, nor child advocate recommended that the mother lose custody or visitation, nor did they require it to be supervised. All of these matters were ongoing when the mother died. Story 21. She accused her ex-husband of sexually molesting their children while under the watchful eye of the nationally endorsed social workers who oversaw his contact with them, which was only required because he didn't have his own private accommodation at the time. She also said that his Indian flatmates were inherently dirty. After the obviously false child molestation suggestion, I warned her of the consequences of being caught lying about that, such as permanent loss of custody. She fired me but kept calling back using fake names to try and obtain free advice, which contradicted my advice, but everyone she called immediately spotted her. This was a long time ago, and now I specialize in insurance litigation, which is far less ugly.